The junkyard was quiet at night. Rusted cars, broken machines, and piles of old metal stood like dead giants under the moonlight. For most people, the junkyard was just trash. But for Daniel, it was his world. Daniel worked here every day. He fixed small parts, collected wires, and sold scrap to survive. He was not rich, and he was not famous. He was just a man living a lonely life among broken things. But in the last few weeks, Daniel had noticed something strange. When the sun went down, the junkyard did not feel empty anymore. At night, when the wind blew through the hollow pipes, he often heard soft sounds. Sometimes it was like footsteps. Sometimes it was like whispering. At first, Daniel thought it was rats or maybe stray dogs. The junkyard was full of hiding places after all. But one evening, he found something that made his heart beat faster. A piece of bread he left on a table was gone the next morning. The strange part? No crumbs, no mess. Whoever took it was careful, like a person, not an animal. Daniel became curious. The next night, he decided to test it. He left a full plate of food, bread, some rice, and a small bottle of water. Then he walked away, pretending not to care. The following morning, everything was gone. The plate was clean. The bottle was empty. Daniel frowned. He was sure now. It was not a dog. It was not a rat. Someone was living in his junkyard. But who? For 3 nights, Daniel repeated the same trick. Each time the food disappeared. Each time, it was taken with care. No sound, no mess, no broken plates. Whoever was out there, they were quiet. And maybe hungry. Daniel started to feel uneasy. The junkyard was his home. He could not let strangers sneak in. But deep inside, another feeling grew. Pity. Whoever they were, they must be desperate. One evening, Daniel made a plan. He placed food again. But this time, he did not leave. He hid behind a stack of broken cars, his eyes fixed on the plate. The night air was cold, and silence wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. His legs became stiff. His eyes started to close. Then, he heard it. Soft footsteps. Slow. Careful. Daniel held his breath. From the shadows, 2 figures appeared. His heart jumped. At first, he thought they were children. But as they came closer, his eyes widened. Their bodies were thin, their skin pale and glowing faintly under the moonlight. Their heads were a little longer than normal, their eyes larger, too large, shining like glass marbles. They were not human. One was taller, a woman, maybe a mother. The other was small, like a young girl. The smaller one clung to the woman's arm, her eyes darting around nervously. They moved like people, but they were different, fragile, strange, and yet gentle. Daniel's mouth went dry. His first thought was to run, to hide, to pretend he had never seen them. But his feet would not move. The 2 strangers reached the food. The little one touched the bread first, then looked up at her mother. The taller one nodded slowly, and together they ate. Fast, but careful, like they had not eaten in days. Daniel watched, frozen. Fear mixed with curiosity. They were not dangerous. They were just hungry. The little girl licked the empty plate and looked at her mother. Her big eyes shined with something Daniel understood. Relief. Then, suddenly, the child looked around, and her gaze stopped on Daniel's hiding place. Daniel's heart raced. Did she see him? The girl tilted her head. For a moment, their eyes locked. Human and alien. Stranger and stranger. She did not scream. She did not run. Instead, she gave the smallest, shyest smile. Daniel's chest tightened. He had lived many years alone, but in that one small smile, he felt something he had forgotten. Connection. The mother touched the child's shoulder and guided her away. They disappeared into the dark corners of the junkyard, leaving the empty plate behind. Daniel slowly came out from his hiding place. The night was quiet again. The junkyard looked the same as always, silent, broken, and full of shadows. But Daniel knew it was no longer empty. Someone, or something, was out there. A mother and daughter not from this world, hiding in his world of rust and broken machines. And he had fed them. He looked at the empty plate and whispered to himself, "This changes everything." The night after Daniel saw them, he could not sleep. The image of the two strange figures stayed in his mind, the pale skin, the large glowing eyes, the way the little one smiled at him before vanishing into the shadows. Daniel had lived alone for years, yet now his world felt different. He wasn't sure if he was afraid or curious. All he knew was that he needed to see them again. The next evening, he prepared another plate of food. This time he added a blanket, folded neatly beside the bread and water. He told himself he wasn't crazy. He was only helping two lost souls, but in his heart, he already knew they were not from this world. He placed the plate in the same spot, then hid behind a rusted truck. The night air smelled of oil and iron, and silence pressed against his ears. Every second felt like an hour. Then, movement. The small figure appeared first, stepping carefully over the junk. Her big eyes scanned the area. Behind her came the taller one, the mother, moving slower, weaker. Daniel noticed how thin she looked, how her steps trembled. The little girl reached the food and touched the blanket. She turned to her mother as if asking what it was. The woman gently pulled it over her daughter's shoulders, and for the first time, Daniel saw the child relax. She even let out a soft laugh, like a bell in the quiet junkyard. That sound made Daniel's heart ache. He could not look away. Suddenly, the girl froze. Her eyes flicked toward the shadow, as where Daniel hid. He felt his blood run cold. She had spotted him. The mother instantly pulled the child behind her, her glowing eyes sharp, alert. Her hands raised slightly, not in attack, but in warning. She looked ready to protect her child with everything she had. Daniel swallowed hard. His hiding was over. Slowly he stood up, raising his hands in the air. His voice was shaky, but calm. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The mother did not move. Her eyes never blinked, fixed on him like knives. Daniel took one step closer, then stopped. He bent down and pushed another small packet of food across the ground toward them. His hands trembled, but his eyes stayed soft. The girl peeked from behind her mother. She looked at Daniel, then at the food. Her curiosity fought with her fear. Finally, she tugged her mother's arm, as if saying, "Please." The mother hesitated, then slowly nodded. Together, they moved forward. The little one grabbed the food with both hands, her eyes shining with joy. She sat on the ground and ate, crumbs falling from her lips. Daniel smiled. Something warm spread in his chest. The mother still watched him carefully, but her eyes softened a little when she saw how the girl enjoyed the food. She placed a hand on her daughter's head, and then, very slowly, looked back at Daniel. It was not trust, not yet. But it was not hate either. Daniel stayed where he was, careful not to scare them. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "As long as I'm around, you're safe." The girl tilted her head at the sound of his voice. She didn't understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone. She gave him that same small smile from before. And in that smile, Daniel felt something stir inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Minutes passed. The girl finished eating. The mother pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. And looked back at Daniel one last time. Without a word, she guided her daughter away into the shadows. The junkyard grew silent again. Daniel stood there, together so they could spin, but for a child it was magic. Together so they could spin, but for a child it was magic. He placed it on the ground and rolled it toward the girl. The child gasped in delight. She picked it up, spun it, and laughed again. Daniel smiled. See? No danger. Just friends. The mother looked at him for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, she placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. It was not full trust yet, but it was a beginning. The night ended quietly. The mother and daughter slipped back into the shadows, leaving Daniel alone once more. But Daniel did not feel alone anymore. The junkyard no longer felt empty. Somewhere out there, two beings from another world were surviving because of him. And for the first time in a long, long while, Daniel felt like he had a purpose. He whispered to himself as he looked at the stars above the junkyard sky. They need me. And maybe I need them too. The junkyard was no longer silent at night. To Daniel, it had become alive. Somewhere between the broken cars and piles of rusted machines, two strangers now waited for him, a mother and her daughter from another world. Each evening, Daniel brought food. Each time, the little girl came forward with less fear. She would giggle when she spun the toy he had made for her, or clap her hands when he rolled a ball of old wires across the ground. Her laughter made the dark junkyard feel lighter, almost warm. The mother, however, remained cautious. She rarely spoke, not in words Daniel could understand anyway. Sometimes she would make soft sounds, almost like whispers, when calming her daughter. Her glowing eyes followed Daniel closely, watching every move he made. She was thin, weak, but Daniel could feel her strength, the strength of a mother protecting her child. Days turned into weeks. Their routine grew steady. Food at night, quiet laughter, small gestures of trust. But one evening, as Daniel sat with he noticed something. The mother shivered under the cold night wind. Her blanket was too thin and her lips looked pale. Daniel frowned. "You need more than food," he whispered, though he knew she might not understand. The next day, Daniel worked hard in the junkyard. He searched through piles of scraps until he found parts of an old heater. By evening, he had repaired it. When night fell, he carried the heater out and placed it near the spot where the mother and daughter usually appeared. When they came, the girl's eyes widened at the soft orange glow. She reached her hands out toward the warmth, laughing in delight. The mother's face softened. For the first time, Daniel thought he saw a hint of a smile. That small smile felt like a gift. From then on, Daniel tried to bring something new each night, a pair of gloves, old clothes, a small cup of sweet tea. The child would always laugh and play, while the mother's eyes slowly grew less sharp. Still, she never let her guard down completely. One night, the little girl surprised him again. After eating, she stood up and walked toward him. Daniel froze, unsure what to do. She reached out her tiny hand and touched his rough fingers. Her skin was cool, soft, almost fragile. Daniel's throat tightened. He had not felt such innocent trust in years. He gently held her hand for a moment, then let go. The mother did not stop her. She only watched, her expression unreadable, but her body relaxed slightly. It was as if she, too, understood that the bond was real now. As the weeks passed, Daniel realized something strange. He no longer waited for them just to help them. He waited because he needed them. Their presence filled the emptiness in his life, but not everything was safe. One evening, while Daniel worked during the day, he noticed fresh tire marks near the junkyard gates. Strangers had been here. Later, he heard two men in the town nearby speaking about strange lights seen on the edge of the junkyard. Daniel's heart sank. If people started searching, the mother and daughter would be discovered. And if that happened, he didn't know what the world would do to them. That night he warned them the only way he could, through gestures. He pointed at the gates, made a shaking motion with his head, and crossed his arms like a barrier. The mother's eyes narrowed. She seemed to understand. She pulled her daughter closer, her protective stance stronger than ever. For the rest of the night, they stayed silent. Even the child did not laugh. The junkyard felt heavy again, filled with fear instead of warmth. But as Daniel walked back to his cabin, the little girl suddenly ran after him. She grabbed his hand, pressed her toy into his palm, and ran back to her mother. Daniel looked down at the toy, the small gears he had made from scraps. The girl had given it back to him. A gift. A sign. His eyes grew wet. He clenched the toy tightly. In that moment, he knew something for certain. They were no longer just strangers he fed. They were his family now, and he would do anything to protect them. For weeks, Daniel's nights had been filled with quiet laughter, soft whispers, and the warmth of two unlikely friends. But peace never lasts long. It began with noises at the gate. One morning, Daniel noticed new footprints in the dirt near the junkyard entrance. Heavy boots. Too large to be his own. Someone had been here. Later that week, a pair of men came by in an old truck. They wore dark jackets, their eyes scanning the piles of junk as if searching for something. "You run this place?" one asked. His voice was flat, sharp. Daniel nodded slowly. "That's right, just me." The second man leaned out of the truck window. "Anyone been sneaking around here? Strays? Outsiders?" Daniel forced a casual smile. "Just rats and rust. Nobody wants to live in a graveyard of metal." The men exchanged looks. One spat on the ground. "Strange lights, seen, Rose? And here, people talking in town. If you see anything unusual, you let us know." They drove off, dust rising behind them. Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew exactly what they were looking for. That night, when the mother and daughter appeared, Daniel was restless. He pointed to the gates and made the same warning gesture as before. His voice was urgent. "Danger! People looking! You must be careful!" The mother tilted her head, her eyes sharp. She touched her daughter's shoulder, pulling her closer. Daniel could see the worry in her face, even if she spoke no words. The child looked confused. She tugged at Daniel's sleeve as if asking why. Daniel knelt down, forcing a smile he did not feel. "It's okay, little one. But you must stay hidden." For the first time, the junkyard did not feel like their secret home. It felt like a trap. The following days grew worse. More strangers visited. Some were government men, others just nosy hunters. They asked questions about noises, about lights in the sky. Each time Daniel played dumb, pretending he knew nothing. But inside, fear clawed at him. At night he brought food as always. The girl tried to play, spinning her toy and laughing softly. But Daniel could not relax. His eyes kept darting toward the shadows, expecting headlights, footsteps, voices. The mother noticed. She studied his face carefully, and though she did not speak his language, she understood. She too began to keep her daughter closer, never letting the child wander more than a step away. One evening, Daniel heard voices outside his cabin. He peered through the window. The two men in dark jackets were back. They were talking to each other, shining flashlights across the junkyard piles. "Tracks here," one muttered. "Could be animals," the other said. "Or not." Daniel's chest tightened. He stepped outside quickly, pretending anger. "Hey, what are you doing on my land?" The men turned their lights on him. One smirked. "Just checking for trespassers." "Well, you're trespassing now," Daniel snapped. "This is private property. You need to leave." For a moment, tension filled the air. Then the taller man chuckled. "Relax, old man. We're just doing our job. Keep your eyes open. Strange things bring trouble." They walked off into the night. Daniel stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding. That night, when the mother and daughter came, he almost told them not to return anymore. It would be safer. If they stayed, they risked being caught. But when he saw the child's smile as she ran toward him, blanket trailing behind, his resolve broke. He could not send them away. Instead, he guided them to a deeper part of the junkyard, a hollow between crushed cars where they could hide better. He dragged old sheets of metal around, creating a wall. It was not much, but it was safer than before. The mother placed her hand on his shoulder. Her eyes glowed softly, not with fear this time, but with gratitude. No words were spoken, yet Daniel felt the meaning clear as day. He was no longer just their helper. He was their protector. But deep inside, Daniel knew things could not stay this way forever. The men would return, others would come. Sooner or later, someone would discover the truth. And when that day came, he would have to make a choice. Stay silent and risk everything, or fight for the family he had found in the shadows of a broken world. The nights grew colder. Daniel noticed the mother moving slower, her steps unsteady. She tried to hide it, but her weakness showed. Her breaths were heavy, her body trembling under the thin blanket. The little girl stayed close to her, her big eyes filled with worry. She clung to her mother's arm and refused to play with her toy. The laughter that once filled the junkyard was gone. Daniel's chest ached. He knew sickness when he saw it. The mother was ill. That night, while the girl nibbled on bread, the mother suddenly coughed, a deep, painful sound. Daniel rushed forward, but the mother lifted her hand, warning him not to come too close. She was still proud, still cautious, but Daniel could see the truth. She was fading. The girl dropped her food and hugged her mother, tears in her wide eyes. She looked at Daniel as if begging for help. Daniel swallowed hard. "It's okay. I'll help her," he whispered, though he wasn't sure how. Back in his cabin, Daniel searched through old boxes. He found some medicine, expired painkillers, a bottle of cough syrup, nothing strong enough to fight a real sickness. He stared at the bottles, frustration burning inside him. If she didn't get proper care, she wouldn't survive. But to take her to a hospital? Impossible. People would see her. The world would know. She would be treated like a specimen, locked away, studied, or worse. Daniel sat at his table, head in his hands. He had lived a quiet life, avoiding choices, avoiding risks. But now, he had something to lose. The next night, when the mother appeared, she looked weaker than before. Her legs shook as she walked. Daniel rushed to her side and offered water mixed with the cough syrup. She hesitated, her eyes sharp with suspicion. The girl looked at him, then at her mother, then nodded as if to say, "Trust him." Slowly, the mother drank. For a moment, silence hung heavy in the junkyard. Then the mother's breathing eased, just a little. She leaned back against the wall of broken cars, her eyes closing. Daniel sat beside her, the girl curled up in his lap. He felt the small heartbeat against his chest, fragile but alive. He knew the truth now. Syrup and old pills would not be enough. She needed more. She needed real medicine. Daniel's mind raced. If he went into town and bought medicine, questions would be asked. The men in dark jackets were already suspicious. But if he did nothing, she would die. The choice was tearing him apart. That evening, he walked to the small pharmacy at the edge of town. His hands shook as he entered. The bright lights felt harsh after weeks of shadows. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "You don't come here often, Daniel? Sick?" Daniel forced a laugh. "Not me. Neighbor. Bad cough. Needs antibiotics." The clerk narrowed his eyes but handed him the box. Daniel paid quickly and left, his heart hammering. Every step back to the junkyard felt like carrying a secret too heavy to hide. That night he gave the mother the medicine. She resisted at first, her eyes suspicious. But the little girl held her hand, whispering softly in her strange tongue. Finally, the mother swallowed the pills. Hours later, her breathing steadied. Her color returned slightly. She slept deeply, her daughter curled against her side. Daniel sat nearby, watching over them. His chest eased for the first time in days. He had risked everything, but he had saved her. As the night stretched on, Daniel whispered to himself, "They're not just strangers anymore, not just shadows in the junkyard. They're my family now." The little girl stirred, opening her glowing eyes. She looked at him, her voice quiet but clear, her words broken yet powerful. "Father." Daniel's eyes widened. He had not expected her to speak his language, even a single word. His throat tightened and his eyes grew wet. He reached out, brushing her hair gently. "Yes," he whispered. "I'll be your father. Always." In that moment, the choice was made. He was no longer just helping them survive. He was bound to them. By trust, by love, by something deeper than blood. But Daniel knew something else, too. The world outside was closing in. The men at the gates, the whispers in town, the suspicion. They would not stop. The mother was safe for now, but danger was coming. And Daniel would have to fight harder than ever to keep his new family safe. The nights in the junkyard no longer felt cold to Daniel. Even with the broken cars and piles of rusted machines around him, the air seemed warmer. The little girl laughed again, spinning her toy, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. The mother, though still weak, was healing. Her breathing was steady, her steps stronger. But peace was fragile. Daniel knew it every time he looked at the gates. Strangers still came around. Men in dark jackets, hunters, curious neighbors. The world outside was searching for something. And Daniel knew exactly what they were looking for. Still, he refused to let fear steal the joy he had found. Each night he brought food, small gifts, or simple comforts. He shared stories in his human tongue, even if they did not understand. The little girl listened with wide eyes, nodding as if she could feel the meaning in his voice. Sometimes she tried to mimic his words, her broken sounds making him smile. "Father," she called him again one night, her voice a little stronger. The word filled Daniel's chest with warmth. He never imagined he would hear that word again, not after losing his own family years ago. But now, here it was, spoken by a child not of his blood, not even of his world. And yet, it felt real. The mother watched quietly. She never spoke in Daniel's language, but her eyes spoke more than words. When the girl clung to him, the mother did not pull her away. When Daniel repaired a toy or offered a blanket, she did not resist. She began to trust him, not fully, but enough. One evening, Daniel built a small fire in a safe corner of the junkyard. The three of them sat together in its glow. The girl laughed, holding her toy close, her face lit with joy. Daniel cooked beans over the fire and shared them, smiling as the child tried the food eagerly. For a moment, it felt like a family dinner, not human and alien, not strangers and outcasts, just family. But the world beyond the junkyard would not stay silent. Late that night, Daniel heard the sound of engines. Headlights cut through the darkness, shining across the piles of scrap. Voices echoed, sharp, demanding. The men were back. Daniel's heart pounded. He rushed to where the mother and daughter hid. "You must stay quiet," he whispered. He pointed to the shadows, urging them to hide deeper among the cars. The mother's eyes flashed with fear. She clutched her daughter close, then gave Daniel a look, half question, half trust. He nodded firmly. "I'll protect you." The girl pressed her toy into his hand again, as if giving him strength. Then they disappeared into the shadows. Daniel stood tall as the men entered. "You again," one said, shining a flashlight in his face. "What are you hiding here?" Daniel forced a laugh. "Same as always. Rust, trash, and rats. Want some scrap metal? I'll give you a discount." The man sneered. "We know something's here. People saw shapes, heard noises. If you're hiding anything, it won't end well for you." Daniel's fists clenched around the toy in his hand. He felt anger rise, hot and sharp. For years he had lived quietly, avoiding trouble. But now, he was no longer just a man in a junkyard. He was a father, a protector. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "There's nothing here for you. Leave." The men stared at him, surprised by the firmness in his tone. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, muttering curses, they turned back to their truck. Engines roared, and the headlights faded into the night. Daniel exhaled, his whole body trembling. He turned back to the shadows. The little girl ran to him, hugging his leg tightly. The mother followed, her eyes shining with gratitude. For the first time, she touched his hand, not with suspicion, but with trust. Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. He looked at them both, his voice breaking. "You're my family now. I'll keep you safe, no matter what." The junkyard was still a place of broken machines and rusted cars, but for Daniel, it had become something new. It was home, not because of the walls of metal, but because of the bond forged in the darkness. A human man, an alien mother, and her child. 3 souls who had nothing, yet found everything in each other. And as the stars shone bright above, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. Family is not made by blood. Family is made by love.